The conference room fell silent as Paxton Stanton finished presenting my strategy proposal. Except, he called it his own. The board members nodded and clapped while I sat there, watching my months of research get credited to someone else. My hands shook under the table. "Great work, Paxton," the CEO said, smiling. "This is exactly the kind of forward thinking we need." Then he looked at me. "Helen, you're good with spreadsheets, but this shows the difference between execution and actual leadership material." The room chuckled. My cheeks burned hot. Paxton shot me a smug look and shrugged like he was saying sorry, but his eyes said something else entirely. I forced myself to smile and nod. "Thank you for the feedback," I managed to say. Inside, I was screaming. The meeting ended with more praise for Paxton. People filed out, patting his shoulder. I stayed in my seat, staring at my notes. The same notes he'd somehow turned into his presentation. My hand clenched into a fist under the table. This wasn't the first time. Over 3 years, I'd been denied promotions 3 times. Each time, they said I wasn't ready. Each time, they gave the role to someone less qualified. I started wondering if something was wrong with me. Last month, I'd applied for a senior analyst position. The hiring manager seemed interested until she mentioned checking references. 2 days later, she stopped returning my calls. I found out later that Paxton had shared concerns about my collaboration skills. HR had started using words like not collaborative and better suited for individual contributor roles in my reviews. It was like they were building a case against me. The worst part, I couldn't prove anything. Paxton had been pushing me toward a specialist role. It sounded fancy, but I knew what it meant. A dead-end job with no advancement track. A place where they could keep me busy, but out of sight. I sat in my cubicle, staring at my computer screen. My resignation letter was saved in my drafts folder. I'd written it 3 times, but never sent it. Where would I go? What would I do? That night, I opened my laptop and pulled up the resignation letter again. My cursor blinked at the end of the last sentence. All I had to do was hit send. But I couldn't. I had bills to pay and no backup plan. My savings account had $3,000. That might cover 2 months of expenses if I was careful. I'd been so focused on moving up at work that I'd never built an escape fund. Now I felt trapped. I deleted the letter and closed my laptop. Maybe tomorrow would be different. Maybe Paxton would get bored and find someone else to torture. Maybe the CEO would realize what was happening and step in. But deep down, I knew nothing would change. I was stuck. My phone buzzed. A voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me listen. "Helen, this is Linda. I'm your aunt. I have something your father left behind for you. It's urgent. Please call me back." I stared at the phone. My father had died when I was 17. I'd never heard of any Aunt Linda. But her voice sounded familiar somehow. I met Linda at a coffee shop downtown. She looked like my father around the eyes, with the same gentle smile. She carried a small lockbox and a manila envelope. "Your father set up a trust fund," she said, sliding the envelope across the table. "It was supposed to mature on your 35th birthday. That's next month." I opened the envelope with shaking hands. The documents inside made no sense at first. Then I saw the number. $30 million. My vision blurred. "He wanted to make sure you'd be taken care of," Linda continued. "He worked 3 jobs to fund this. He never wanted you to feel trapped the way he did." I read his letter. His handwriting was exactly like I remembered. "I love you. Use it well." My eyes filled with tears. "There are no conditions," Linda explained. "It's yours to do whatever you want with. He trusted you to make the right choices." I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. $30 million. I could quit tomorrow. I could disappear. I could start over anywhere. But as I drove home, a different idea started forming. I decided to keep working for Paxton. I showed up the next day like nothing had happened. I sat in meetings, nodded at his suggestions, and acted like I'd given up fighting. Paxton seemed pleased. He stopped watching me as closely. He started ignoring me completely, which was exactly what I wanted. During my lunch breaks, I met with financial advisors under a fake name. I told them I'd inherited money and needed help investing it. They showed me portfolios and talked about safe returns. But I wasn't interested in safe. I started researching distressed companies, firms that were struggling but had good bones. places where smart money could make a real difference. I spent my evenings reading annual reports and financial statements. I learned about debt-to-equity ratios and cash flow analysis. I studied companies that had been bought and turned around. Paxton thought I was broken. He had no idea I was planning something that would change everything. The best part? He'd trained me well. All those years of watching him manipulate situations had taught me exactly how power really worked. I found ZenX Systems 3 weeks later. They were a mid-sized tech company with solid IP but terrible management. Their contracts were shrinking, their best people were leaving, and their stock price was in free fall. But their technology was brilliant. They developed software that could streamline operations for companies like mine. The kind of innovation that Paxton's firm desperately needed but was too stubborn to pursue. I dug deeper into ZenX's history. That's when I discovered something interesting. 2 years ago, they'd tried to partner with Paxton's company. They'd pitched a collaboration that would have saved both firms millions. Paxton had killed the deal. He'd called their technology unproven, and their leadership unprofessional. He'd refused to even consider their proposal. Now ZenX was dying, and one of their lost clients was a company that had followed Paxton's recommendation to drop them. The same client had later struggled with inefficiencies that ZenX's software could have solved. I scheduled a meeting with ZenX's CEO, Marcus Webb. He looked exhausted but hopeful when I mentioned potential investment. "We just need someone who believes in what we're building," he said. I smiled. "I think I can help with that." I created a holding company called Carter Holdings. It sounded generic enough to avoid attention. I bought 82% of ZenX through a series of quiet transactions. No press releases, no announcements, just clean, professional paperwork. The total cost was $26 million. I kept $4 million as operating capital. Marcus was grateful but confused. "Why keep it quiet?" he asked during our first executive meeting. "Because quiet money works better," I told him. "We're going to rebuild this company the right way." During that same meeting, I learned something that made my blood boil. ZenX had actually tried to partner with Paxton's firm twice. The second time, they'd offered to license their technology at a discount. Paxton had responded by spreading rumors about ZenX's financial stability. He told clients they were circling the drain and couldn't be trusted for long-term partnerships. His sabotage had directly contributed to ZenX's downward spiral. He'd destroyed a good company just to protect his own ego. I sat in that meeting, listening to Marcus describe the damage, and felt my resolve harden. This wasn't just about getting back at Paxton anymore. It was about fixing something he'd broken. Back at Paxton's company, I started noticing things I'd missed before. Financial reports that didn't add up, expense accounts that seemed inflated, projects that went over budget with no explanation. I'd been so focused on my own problems that I'd never paid attention to the bigger picture. Now I saw it clearly. Paxton wasn't just a bad boss. He was a bad executive who was bleeding the company dry. I started documenting everything. I made copies of reports, saved emails, and tracked patterns. I didn't plan to use any of it immediately. I just wanted to understand how deep his incompetence went. 3 months later, the quarterly numbers showed significant losses. Paxton blamed legacy operations and market conditions. He promised the board that his new strategies would turn things around. But I knew better. I'd seen the real numbers. I'd watched him make decision after decision that prioritized his ego over the company's health. I found a compliance contact through a former colleague, someone who worked in corporate governance and took anonymous tips seriously. I sent them a carefully prepared package of documents. No return address, no signature, just facts and figures that told their own story. My breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Marcus had hired a new operations manager named Tyler Brooks. Tyler used to work for Paxton. "I kept everything," Tyler told me during a private meeting. "Spreadsheets, emails, timesheets. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't prove it alone." He showed me documents that made my stomach turn. Paxton had been padding headcount numbers on internal reports. He'd been claiming productivity gains that didn't exist. He'd been billing clients for work that was never completed. Ghost employees, Tyler called them. He'd create fake positions, bill for their salaries, then pocket the difference through consulting fees to shell companies. The evidence was overwhelming. Paxton hadn't just been stealing from the company. He'd been running a sophisticated fraud scheme for years. "Why didn't you report this?" I asked. Tyler laughed bitterly. "To who?" HR reported to him. The CFO was his golf buddy. I tried to document everything, hoping someone would eventually ask the right questions. I studied the files he'd brought: bank statements, forged signatures, fabricated performance reviews, everything needed to destroy Paxton's career and probably send him to prison. "What do you want to do with this?" I asked. Tyler smiled. "I want to watch him burn." I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I instituted a strict no-poach policy at Zennex. I wouldn't actively recruit anyone from Paxton's firm. If people wanted to join us, they'd have to come on their own. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked. "We could really use some of their talent." "I'm sure," I said. "I want people who choose us, not people who are running from something." Within a week, 3 people from Paxton's company had quit. They all cited different reasons. One said she was seeking new challenges. Another mentioned cultural misalignment. The third simply said he was ready for a change. All 3 showed up at Zennex's offices within days of leaving. They hadn't been recruited. They'd heard about our company culture through industry connections and wanted to be part of something better. The best part? They all had stories about Paxton. Stories about missed opportunities, ignored suggestions, and good people driven away by his ego. "He creates his own problems," one of them told me. "Then he blames everyone else when things go wrong." I was starting to see the full picture. Paxton wasn't just hurting individuals. He was systematically destroying everything around him. The video arrived in my email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Thought you should see this." It was security footage from a company happy hour. Paxton was drunk, holding court with a group of junior executives. His voice was loud and slurred. "Helen was dead weight," he was saying. "She just did the typing. I had to carry her for years. Thank God we finally got rid of her." The group laughed. Someone asked if he thought I'd find another job. "Who's going to hire her?" Paxton replied. "She's got no leadership skills, no vision. She's a glorified secretary who thought she was management material." The video continued for another 10 minutes. Paxton talking about how he'd saved the company by getting rid of deadweight employees like me, how he'd restructured the team to focus on real talent. I watched it 3 times. Each viewing made me angrier and more determined. The email sender revealed themselves in a follow-up message. Amy Chen, a former intern who'd worked under both of us. She'd recorded the video on her phone and wanted me to have it. "I don't want money," she wrote. "I just want you to succeed. He's a terrible person, and everyone knows it." I thought about my father that night. He'd died when I was 17, just before my senior year of high school. Cancer took him quickly, but not before he'd made sure I'd be okay. I remembered sitting by his hospital bed, holding his hand while he struggled to breathe. "I want the best for my daughter," he'd told the nurse. "She's going to do great things." At the time, I thought he was just being a proud parent. Now I understood. He'd been planning for this moment. He'd known I'd eventually face something that would test everything I believed about myself. The trust fund wasn't just money. It was his way of giving me options when I needed them most. It was his way of making sure I'd never have to accept being treated as less than I was worth. I pulled out his letter and read it again. "I love you. Use it well." I was using it well. I was building something better than what Paxton had torn down. I was proving that leadership wasn't about ego or politics. It was about results. My father would have been proud. Zennex started winning contracts. Small ones at first, but they added up. Companies that had been burned by larger firms liked our approach. We were responsive, honest, and delivered what we promised. I didn't announce my involvement. I let Marcus take credit for the turnaround. But I made sure every client interaction reflected the values Paxton had mocked. Collaboration over competition, results over politics, substance over style, word spread through industry networks. Zennex is different, people said. They actually listen to what you need. Meanwhile, rumors started circulating about Paxton's firm. Whispers about missed deadlines, cost overruns, and unhappy clients. People wondered if someone on the inside was feeding information to competitors. The truth was simpler. Paxton's own incompetence was finally catching up with him. Years of prioritizing appearance over substance had created a house of cards. Now it was starting to collapse. I didn't need to push it. I just needed to wait. A former client called me directly. "Helen, I know you're involved with ZenNex somehow. We want to work with you." I smiled. "I'll set up a meeting." The client was Richardson Industries, a manufacturing company that Paxton had treated terribly. He'd promised them a custom solution, taken their money, then delivered generic software that didn't meet their needs. When they'd complained, he'd blamed their unrealistic expectations and lack of technical understanding. He'd made them feel stupid for expecting what they'd paid for. "We want a switch," their CEO told me. "Can ZenNex handle our requirements?" I showed him exactly what we could do. Real solutions, not excuses. Clear timelines, not vague promises. Honest pricing, not hidden fees. He signed the contract that afternoon, a 3-year deal worth $2.4 million annually. The best part? It was the same contract Paxton had bragged about securing forever. He'd told the board that Richardson would never leave because they were too invested in our ecosystem. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Richardson sent a formal termination notice to Paxton's firm the next day. They cited failure to deliver promised functionality and unprofessional service as reasons for ending the relationship. Paxton called me that evening. His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "Congratulations on your little project," he said. "Hope you're not too bitter about how things ended." I almost laughed. He still didn't know. Linda called to check on me. She'd been following ZenNex's progress through industry publications and was impressed by what she saw. "Your father would be so proud," she said. "But I have to ask, what's your endgame here?" I paused. It was a good question. What did I want? "I want to prove that good leadership isn't about tearing people down," I said finally. "I want to show that you can build something successful without destroying everything around you." Linda was quiet for a moment. "Revenge burns clean," she said, "but not forever. Make sure you're building something that will last beyond whatever satisfaction you get from proving him wrong." After we hung up, I sat in my office thinking about her words. Was this about revenge, or was it about something bigger? I looked around at the ZenNex offices. People were working late, but they were smiling. They believed in what we were building. They felt valued and respected. This wasn't revenge. This was redemption. But I wasn't done yet. Paxton's email arrived from a Gmail account I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "No hard feelings." "Helen," it began, "I heard about your involvement with ZenNex. Congrats on your little project. I hope you're not too bitter about how things ended between us. Sometimes business requires tough decisions, and I hope you understand that my recommendations were based on what was best for the company. I wish you well in your future endeavors." I read it twice. The condescension was breathtaking. He was still treating me like a child who needed his approval. The email continued, "I'm sure you'll find your niche eventually. Not everyone is cut out for leadership, and there's no shame in that. Your technical skills were always solid, even if the strategic thinking wasn't there." I forwarded the email to Tyler and Marcus. Their responses were immediate and unprintable. But I had a better idea. I saved the email in a special folder. Someday, I might need to remind people exactly how Paxton viewed his former employees. For now, I simply replied, "Thank you for the feedback. I'll keep it in mind." Let him think he was still in control. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Janet Morrison, a former HR manager at Paxton's firm, reached out through LinkedIn. She'd been forced out 6 months earlier and was still angry about it. "I have something you need to see," she said during our phone call. We met at a restaurant outside the city. She brought a flash drive containing hundreds of documents. Paxton falsified performance reviews, she explained. He changed ratings, backdated documents, and created fake documentation to avoid paying proper severance when he fired people. The evidence was damning. Screenshots of edited reviews, email chains discussing liability management, and spreadsheets tracking how much money they'd saved by manipulating performance data. "How many people?" I asked. 43 over the past 5 years, Janet said. "He cost those people thousands of dollars in severance pay, and he destroyed their references so they couldn't find new jobs easily." I studied the documents. This wasn't just unethical. It was illegal. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Janet smiled grimly. Because I want to watch him answer for what he's done, and I think you're the person who can make that happen. Paxton was panicking. I could see it in his behavior during company meetings. He was making sudden decisions, changing strategies midstream, and blaming everyone else for problems he'd created. The board was asking questions, clients were leaving. Revenue was down 15% from the previous quarter. His solution? A complete rebrand. New logo, new website, new marketing materials. He was convinced that perception was the problem, not performance. He hired a marketing firm to handle the rebrand. What he didn't know was that the firm's creative director, Ashley Park, had worked with me on a project years earlier. We'd stayed in touch. Ashley called me the day after Paxton's team briefed them. "You're going to love this," she said. His entire strategy is about distancing the company from past mistakes and legacy thinking. He literally used air quotes when he talked about former employees who couldn't adapt to modern business practices. She sent me copies of all the creative briefs. Paxton's new brand positioning was built around being forward-thinking and results-driven. The messaging emphasized fresh leadership and innovative solutions. It was exactly the kind of shallow rebranding that fooled no one but looked good in PowerPoint presentations. I forwarded everything to Marcus. "This is what desperation looks like," I wrote. The invitation arrived on official letterhead. The Regional Business Council was hosting a panel discussion on innovation in corporate leadership. Paxton was listed as a featured speaker. I'd been invited to participate as well. The topic was emerging leaders in technology. They wanted me to represent the startup perspective. I almost declined. The last thing I wanted was to share a stage with Paxton. But then I had a better idea. I RSVP'd under my full name, Helen Carter, ZenNex Holdings. No title, no explanation. Just my name and company. The event coordinator called to confirm my background. I gave them a brief overview of ZenNex's recent success and my role in the turnaround. They were impressed. "We're excited to have you," she said. "It's always great to feature local success stories." I spent the week preparing. Not a presentation, but a mindset. I would be calm, professional, and focused on substance over style. Let Paxton be the one who looked desperate. The panel was held in a hotel ballroom downtown. About 200 business leaders attended, including several board members from Paxton's firm. Paxton saw me as he walked onto the stage. His face went pale, then red. He clearly hadn't expected to see me there. The moderator introduced each panelist. When she got to me, she mentioned ZenNex's remarkable turnaround, an innovative approach to client services. Paxton's introduction focused on his years of experience and proven track record. He sounded like he was reading from a resume. During the discussion, I said little. I answered questions directly and honestly. I talked about building sustainable cultures and focusing on long-term value over short-term gains. Paxton, meanwhile, gave long-winded responses full of corporate buzzwords. He talked about synergies and paradigm shifts and disruptive innovation. The audience was polite but unengaged. After the panel, several people approached me. One was William Foster, a board member from Paxton's firm. "I'd like to learn more about ZenNex," he said. "Would you be available for a conversation?" I smiled. "Of course." William Foster visited ZenNex the following week. He said he was exploring partnership opportunities, but I could tell he was conducting due diligence. I gave him a complete tour. Clean offices, engaged employees, organized processes. I showed him our financial statements, client testimonials, and growth projections. "This is impressive," he said. "How long have you been running this operation?" "About 8 months," I replied. "We focused on building a sustainable foundation rather than chasing quick wins." He asked about my background. I told him about my experience in corporate strategy and my decision to pursue entrepreneurship. "Did you work under Paxton Stanton?" he asked casually. I met his eyes, briefly. He nodded like that explained everything. We talked for another hour about industry trends, competitive positioning, and growth strategies. As he left, he shook my hand. "Thank you for your time. I'll be in touch." I watched him drive away, knowing he'd gotten exactly what he'd come for. The question was what he'd do with it. 2 days later, I heard through industry contacts that Paxton's board had called a special meeting to review operational efficiency, and leadership effectiveness. The internal collapse at Paxton's firm was swift and brutal. William Foster and the other board members had started asking detailed questions about expense reports, client relationships, and performance metrics. Nothing added up. Contracts that Paxton claimed were solid were actually on probation. Clients he'd described as satisfied were actively seeking alternatives. Revenue projections he'd promised were based on deals that didn't exist. The ghost employees Tyler had documented were just the beginning. The board discovered shell companies, inflated consulting fees, and expense accounts that couldn't be justified. Paxton tried to explain everything as aggressive accounting and creative cost management. He blamed the CFO, the accounting department, and legacy systems for the discrepancies. But the evidence was too overwhelming. Bank statements didn't lie. Client contracts couldn't be fabricated. The numbers told their own story. I didn't make a single phone call. I didn't influence anyone. I simply waited for the truth to surface. 23 years of poor leadership, ethical shortcuts, and ego-driven decisions had finally caught up with him. The board scheduled an emergency meeting for the following Monday. The call came on Friday afternoon. Paxton's voice was strained and formal. "Helen, I need to inform you that there will be an emergency board meeting on Monday. Your presence has been requested." I almost laughed. He thought he was summoning me to face some kind of disciplinary action. "What's the meeting about?" I asked. "Corporate governance issues," he said. "I can't go into details, but your name has come up in our discussions." I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. He thought he'd finally found a way to destroy me. "I'll be there," I said. Monday morning, I dressed carefully. Professional but not defensive. Confident but not arrogant. I had no idea what to expect, but I knew I was ready for whatever came next. I arrived at the company's headquarters 30 minutes early. The receptionist seemed surprised to see me. "Miss Carter? They're waiting for you in the main conference room." I walked down the familiar hallway, past the offices where I'd spent 3 years of my life. Everything looked the same, but I felt completely different. I opened the conference room door and stepped inside. Paxton was sitting at the far end of the table, his face white as paper. The entire board was present, along with the company's legal counsel. I took the empty seat at the head of the table, directly across from Paxton. "Thank you for coming," William Foster said. "We have some things to discuss." William Foster opened a folder and pulled out a document. Last month, Zennex Holdings acquired a majority stake in this company through a debt restructuring arrangement. Paxton's face went from white to green. "That's impossible," he said. "I would have been notified." "You were," Foster replied. "The notices were sent to your office 3 weeks ago. Perhaps you were too busy to review them." He slid the documents across the table. Purchase agreements, debt assignments, and board resolutions. All signed, notarized, and legally binding. "The acquisition was triggered by a technical default on our credit facility," Foster continued. "Multiple clients terminated their contracts simultaneously, creating a cash flow crisis that activated the acceleration clause." Paxton stared at the papers. "Who's behind this? Who owns Zennex?" Foster looked at me. "Would you like to explain?" I stood up slowly. "Zennex Holdings is my company. I acquired it 8 months ago and have been rebuilding it ever since. The clients who left your firm came to us because we offered them something you couldn't: competent leadership." Paxton's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You? You bought my company?" "Technically, I bought the debt," I said. "Your company came with it." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a printed email. "I believe you sent me this a few weeks ago." I read from his message. "Not everyone is cut out for leadership, and there's no shame in that." I looked up at him. "You were right. I'm not cut out for your kind of leadership. I'm something else entirely." The room was silent. Paxton slumped in his chair, defeated. "Effective immediately," Foster announced. "Mr. Stanton is relieved of his duties. Miss Carter, the board looks forward to working with you on the transition." I didn't gloat. I didn't make a speech. I simply gathered my materials and walked out of the conference room. Paxton was removed quietly. No press release, no announcement, no fanfare. He cleaned out his office that afternoon and left through the back exit. I never spoke to him again. The transition took 6 months. I combined the two companies, kept the best people from both, and rebuilt everything from the ground up. The new organization was stronger, more efficient, and infinitely more ethical than what came before. Tyler became my CFO. Marcus ran the technology division. Janet returned to head HR with a mandate to create the kind of workplace culture that valued people over politics. We didn't just survive, we thrived. 3 years later, I was featured on the cover of Business Weekly. The headline read, "The Quiet Revolutionary: How Helen Carter Built a $200 million Company by Focusing on People." The article mentioned my unconventional path to leadership and my commitment to ethical business practices. It didn't mention Paxton at all. I framed my father's letter and hung it in my office. Below it, I added a small plaque. Leadership isn't about raising your voice, it's about raising others up. I built something better, and I never once had to raise my voice to do it.